What is free speech and why does it matter? And why do the right get it wrong? I'm going to look at the differences between tradition of political philosophy in the West and some religious or faith traditions and their understandings of speech and free speech. By the way, a big shout out to one of my students who made one of those little graphic things that people put on their videos that make it look fancy. Here it is. So John Stuart Mill is our really important political philosopher here. And here's a picture of him with a little bow on, like a little Christmas present. And he is one of the most influential political philosophers in the Western world. So we really need to pay attention to what he said, because we already are. We need to understand that what we mean when we talk about free speech in the West is largely because of him. That's not to say everything about him was great, but what he thought has massively influenced the way we think in the West. And so we need to understand him. Mill was a big fan of democracy. He believed in majority rule. He believed that we should, however we do it, we should work out what the majority want and make our public ethical decisions based on that. But he was worried about something. He was worried about what he called the tyranny of the majority. What if the majority are wrong and silence minority voices, unpopular opinions, or the opinions of minority groups, but particularly minority opinions he was concerned about. And so he said we need to have a way of tempering democracy. You remember, many of you, I'm sure, at the end of the Brexit referendum, lots of people said, that's democracy, shut up, put up with it, stop going on about it, which is the most undemocratic thing, of course, you can say after any decision is being made. You're the minority, you can't speak. It's very John Stuart Mill, it's very not British values to tell people, be quiet. It's the tyranny of a slim majority, in that case, telling everyone else your opinion is no longer valid. And when the far right talk about free speech, it's the shut up, we're speaking type of free speech, not the John Stuart Mill type. So if we think of it this way, John Stuart Mill believed that democracy was the good that led to ethical decisions and right decisions, led to the truth. For him, the top of the triangle is democracy. And then the two other corners of our triangle are free speech and avoiding harm, or the harm principle, as we call it. And so he believed that while we needed to make decisions together and go with the majority, we should always make sure we have ways of hearing minority voices and hearing everybody speak in order that we might get to the truth, whatever the truth is. For John Stuart Mill, free speech mattered because the truth matters and making decisions in public life mattered. Free speech wasn't, for him, an end in itself, a good in and of itself. He didn't believe that everybody should be able to say anything they like at any point for any reason. He wasn't what we now call an edgelord, somebody who's trying to be edgy all the time just for the sake of it, because being edgy makes you a free speech champion. Not a bit of that. He wasn't a pizza cutter. In other words, somebody who was all edge and no point. He was all about getting to the point with his free speech. Free speech is important, but not harming others is also important. So we start with free speech, and then we caveat it with not harming others. Religious understandings of speech and free speech flip that the other way around. For most religious traditions, for the Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Bahá'í, and other traditions, what we start with is the morality or ethics of how we speak. That speech should be loving or unifying or true, that how we speak matters first, and then whether or not we should speak is secondary to that. So it's not about individual rights. It's not about individual libertarianism or individual freedoms. The Christian tradition, just like all the other traditions, is about first to love and do what you will. But love is first. And so for Buddhism, it's all about how do we reduce harm? How do we reduce suffering, or dukkha? How do we reduce suffering for ourselves? And how do we reduce suffering for others and for all life? And one of the ways we do that is by practicing skilled speech. Skilled speech is as much about listening as it is about speaking. It's about knowing when to be silent. It's about, first of all, only speaking in order to reduce the suffering of yourself and others. And then, if that's not how your speech is going to work, just don't speak. That isn't to say that Buddhism is anti-democratic, of course, because if you look at the early stories and traditions, the Pali traditions of Buddhism, we see the Buddha building a sangha, building a community of people who negotiated, who worked by consensus, who pushed back against him and his decisions and lobbied in order to bring about change. And so he was part of a community where skilled speech was used to try and work out what's the best way. And that all those best ways of being were always provisional. We're always provisional on the next attempt to try and improve and change the way we work and live together. And so speech that reduced harm comes first, and then using that speech in order to find better ways to live together and reduce harm further was second. Nowhere in that understanding of skilled speech is about individual rights or right to express whatever you like. For Buddhist tradition, for Christian, for Muslim traditions, for I can't think of a single religion which has this far right approach where the most important good is being able to say whatever you like to whoever you like. It's horrific. And it leads, of course, to conspiracy theories being given platforms, not just allowed, but like actively given platforms. For example, Reform have invited people who have harmful views around vaccines to speak. And when challenged on that, they just say, free speech, free speech. Nigel Farage said it just this week. He refused to give his position. He said, oh, well, my position is free speech. And so he lacked the courage of his own convictions around this. It's there with Elon Musk and his use of Grok AI in ways which are harmful to women and children. It's there in the way Reform is pushing back against attempts by our current government in the UK to make children safe on the internet. Nigel Farage pushes back against keeping children safe on the internet because for him, free speech is an end in itself, and free speech is more important than having more important than stopping Grok AI from creating indecent images, more important than stopping those images from being shared. For him, the greatest good is allowing people to say what they like. And he's forgotten all about the harm principle that John Stuart Mill talked about. He has no sense of the ahimsa principle, the non-violent principle of Buddhism, or of the love and then do what you will principle of Christianity. All of that has been cast aside. Free speech is the thing. And if you value speech that hopefully brings about less suffering and more love in the world, please like and subscribe any YouTube channel you see bringing about a positive message. As you do that, it helps YouTube become a better and kinder place. I tell you, the people who are producing hateful content on YouTube, they are getting liked and subscribed all the time. And one of the ways we can resist that is by liking and subscribing to the good stuff. So if you think of this as the good stuff, please join me and like and subscribe here today.